Welcome. I am Dr. Patrice Berry, licensed clinical psychologist, and here I share legal and entertainment news from a psychological perspective. So, if you are just here for the court coverage, today is a bit of a special day where I want to talk about boundaries. And for a lot of people, setting boundaries can be something that is really difficult. And so, on my community tab, I regularly share resources, and there are a lot of different resources and tools that are right there on the community tab. And this week, I shared this one about boundaries, and I want to go on ahead and read it. And thank you to everyone that's joining so far. If you could do me a favor and just like the video, if you're a regular member and you enjoy this type of content, it just helps in the whole algorithm thing. And so this says people don't have to agree with boundaries for you to execute them. So I'll say that again. People don't have to agree with boundaries for you to execute them. Boundaries are meant to keep you safe and are meant to keep you comfortable. Your comfort may make others uncomfortable, and that's okay. And so this post, because that is really, really difficult for people who are people pleasers, for people that have histories of trauma, specifically complex trauma, because sometimes what can happen is there is a stress response called fawn or people pleasing. And sometimes we can get stuck in that loop. And so I really want to share some tips and tools of how to make this practical. And and so the post goes on to say, a little secret from a therapist. Emotionally immature people will not respond well to your boundaries. Don't be surprised when they block you, give you the silent treatment, create drama, or have a tantrum. Your job is to maintain your boundaries despite the response from the people who don't want you to have boundaries. Repeat after me. I can uphold my boundaries even when people don't like them. And for people pleasers, like that can be very, very difficult. And I'm saying this as a recovering people pleaser. I'm not saying this from like, oh, as a psychologist. No, no, no. So this is something that was very, very difficult for me. And what I personally had to do was I had to start small. So I was the type of person where if I ordered something at a store and they got it wrong, I would just be like, okay, I guess this is what I'm eating now. So, like, if I ordered the chicken and they gave me the shrimp, as long as the shrimp was more expensive. Now, if I order shrimp and you gave me chicken, oh no, no, like that's you're messing with my money. I'm gonna get what I ordered. But along the way, I had to start setting some of those boundaries. And what can happen when you don't set boundaries is you can be frustrated. You can get overwhelmed. It starts to really have an impact on you, and for some people, they are trained or raised to think that boundaries make them selfish, especially if you were raised with any type of spiritual or religious trauma, if you were raised in a high demand, high control family where you didn't have a voice. I was talking with someone recently about the fact that I give my 6-year-old, and ever since he was about 2 or 3, I give him choice with what he wears to school because like that's a simple choice, and what I do is all the options available, they are appropriate. So I put so right now we are in like spring, almost like coming out of winter, maybe trying to think about spring type of weather. So I have all his shorts out of his reach because right now in Virginia it's still a little too cold for him to wear shorts every day. So he has pants, he has shirts, everything that's available, it's something that he can wear. And then I have the things that wouldn't, if he did put it on, I would be, you can't wear your pirate costume to school." So I have the pirate costume out of his reach, where when he goes in his closet on his school clothes rack, there are no bad options. And giving children a voice. So a lot of this unfortunately starts, and not unfortunately, but a lot of this starts in childhood because there are people that were never given the ability to speak for themselves, to have a voice. They were told what to think, what to do, what to say, what to not say. There may have been adults or older children or other peers that violated those boundaries, and and so that's why I really, really like to have these conversations. I am a big pick and choose your battles with kids. So don't set a consequence that you're not willing to maintain. Please don't say like you'll never ever get your phone back if like they're probably going to be grounded from their phone for maybe a month, maybe 2 weeks, like for parents to try to not oversay things. And I am so glad that y'all are here. I'm so glad that hopefully this can be helpful. There are some new terms that we are going to discuss that I had not heard of until a client actually showed me a video. And I was like, oh, I had never heard of echoism. And so in this video, we are going to, we're going to talk about people pleasers. Um, and then we go from people pleasing to like codependent behavior. And we're going to talk about echoism, which, like I said, I had never heard of that. And it's not a diagnosis. So please, so you can't diagnose yourself based on me sharing like some symptoms of what's going on. Um, we learn in intro psychology, especially in our psychopathology class, where we learn about all the different disorders. The therapist says, as you're learning and reading about these disorders, you're going to think that you have everything. Now, I do think language helps direct treatment, or it helps direct what's next or what might be helpful. And so sometimes having language around, I thought I was codependent, but really, I'm more of I echo what people are saying or what people are doing or what I think people want, which is very different from codependence. And so that's why I'm sharing some of this language. If you have your own therapist, if you're in your own treatment, please like bring any resources or tools and share those with your treatment provider. I cannot give you like any diagnosis or because I wouldn't like that would be unethical for me to do any of that kind of thing. I also can't help people with their specific concerns. So that's something that's done within the privacy security of therapy. We can't do that over social media. So I like to set those boundaries. And if you need help, or resources, finding a therapist in your area, psychologytoday.com, Therapy Den, and I'm not sponsored by any, so I'm actually not listed on Psychology Today because therapists have to pay to be on that directory. I am on Therapy Den because that one is free, and my therapy practice is fully booked. So I don't do this to raise my own practice. I just share these tips and tools as resources for you all. Let's hop right into people pleasing versus codependency because there is a bit of a difference. I have all these links down in the description. When we start talking about people pleasing, the word codependent often gets thrown into the mix. People pleasers can be codependent, but these are two different things. All right. And so let's look at it as a continuum. So some people are just nice. So I like putting people pleasing. If I had made this graphic, I would have put um so because sometimes we think of things as black or white, all or nothing, when often many people it's a bit of a spectrum. And so this particular graphic has people pleasing. I want to make this a little bigger. Can I make this a little bigger? Escape. I think I can make it a little bigger. All right. So it has being nice, people pleasing, and then codependency. Um, and I say it's so she says it's a loose continuum because even though they'll describe just being nice, people pleasing, and codependent, the reality is that we all dance back and forth across this spectrum. Even though there's some overlap, it can be helpful to outline the differences between just being nice, people pleasing, and codependency. All right. Challenging our concepts of what is normal can highlight our need for personal growth, which impacts life satisfaction. Blah, blah. Okay. All right. And so let's get down to What's the difference between just being nice, people pleasing, and codependency? So, with just being nice, so when we're just being nice, we're not motivated by getting anything in return. We're just being kind, giving to others. It's coming, there's no internal motive for doing it. In general, when people are people pleasing, there is this desire or want or need to control what others think of us. And that was something that I was very, very guilty of. I like being liked. And it was a big deal for me to really accept the fact that I'm not for everyone and everyone isn't for me. That there are some people that just aren't going to like me, and that's okay. There's nothing I need to try to do to win them over. There's nothing that I need to try to do to, I don't know, for them to like me. I grew up, traveling with my mom with the military. We moved about every 5 years. It was pretty easy for me to make new friends, but part of it was because I was a bit of a chameleon and I would adapt to whatever environment I was in. And as an adult, that kind of had me looking back like, with this, I had to develop my sense of identity of who I am, what I like, because I was used to just kind of adapting to my environment, adapting to who I was around. And so it's really important that individuals that are people pleasers, that they develop their own sense of this is what I like, this is what I don't like, their own sense of identity and giving their opinion even if they know somebody won't like it. Like that is huge. And so with people pleasing, you might be looking to gain a sense of worth or identity. And then also it can be looking for a sense of safety by keeping the peace at all costs. And in my family, conflict was kind of so anger, with me and my mom, anger wasn't something that was openly expressed. It was kind of a anger was a bad emotion, and I'm so thankful that as an adult and, what I'm teaching my child is that emotions are just emotions. They just are. What I do with that emotion is what's important. It's okay for me to be mad at someone. Somebody can do something that makes me mad. Now, one thing that my mom so she was okay with expressing anger towards other drivers, like anger on the road. That was something that was very openly expressed and but like anger if I was mad at my mom, that wasn't something that I could go and talk with her about on a regular, like, 'cause she'd be like, what do you have to be mad about? Do you pay bills?" And she didn't mean for it to be invalidating, but it could be. And that's where I try to be very careful with my child, because I can validate an emotion without agreeing with it, without so like if my child is mad because right now the door to the office is locked, his father is downstairs, I can hear him if something, and he's 6 years old, if he needs me, I can hear him, but right now he can't come into the office. And so I would say, "Buddy, I get that that made you upset. So what did you do to manage that?" "Oh, I played with my Legos," or, "But, I was disappointed that I couldn't play with you, mommy." "Okay." And that it's okay for him to be disappointed, for him to be mad at me, like that's completely okay. And as a parent, I don't have to give in to his every like whim, whatever. And I also don't think that it's my job to keep him happy all the time. That, like, he might be mad about, and he's not. My son, he's not, to my knowledge, he's not upset right now because I've told him at 3 PM, that's when we're gonna play, that's when he gets to get on his Nintendo Switch, which is what he's looking forward to doing next. And so, with codependency, that is when people pleasing crosses the line and, things kind of ramp up to needing to be needed by someone else. There is another person involved with codependency, often someone with a significant emotional, physical, or practical needs. And that's where someone dates someone that is really broken and that needs them emotionally, and they're trying to change who they are and help them. That's codependency. That language came out of substance treatment, where there is a spouse or parent or somebody that is enabling the person's behavior, or that isn't letting them take responsibility for their actions. That's not holding them accountable. And boundaries are really, really important in situations like that. And so that is that. Codependency can develop as a result of childhood trauma, and this goes into that a little bit more. Codependency can be learned in families, in our culture, and it can show up in relationships where there's some type of caretaking capacity. And so there are lots of similarities between people pleasing and codependency, but I want to get to the echoism. So we are going to watch this short video because this is what my client showed me, and I had never seen this. And I hadn't heard of this term before. And this term was developed by Dr. Craig Malkin. Yes, I might be saying it wrong. Y'all know me in names. I do have his book linked, Rethinking Narcissism, down below. And he also has a YouTube channel with a ton of resources. So this isn't the Dr. Craig. So this is somebody else. This is Jim Brillen. Mm. And then I'm gonna play a clip of Dr. Craig. So let's start here.
It's a really good question, but no, echoism and codependency are actually two different things. Echoism is a trait, it's not a disorder. An echoist is not a narcissist. Although codependency and echoism have some similarities. In both, people can be enabling of other people's behaviors. An echoist is somebody that neglects their needs and they're focused on other people. Same thing with codependency. Echoists are generally very empathic people, skilled listeners. They don't try to manipulate and guide people into doing certain things. In fact, just the opposite. They avoid self-expression. They're actually vulnerable to narcissistic abuse, and often echoist tendencies happen in reaction to being around a pathological narcissist. Often in relationships, somebody with echoism, their partner struggles to actually understand them because they don't share who they are. They don't share their needs, desires, and they can be sort of an enigma to other people.
Hey Jim, is echoism the same thing as
All right, y'all. Like, so um what I have to break this down some more, because on one side is narcissism. Dr. Craig also talks about that there can be some healthy, because narcissism is a spectrum. Everything isn't on that extreme end, and that sometimes there can be some healthy, because and, so not the emotionally abusive or harmful traits, with so that would be on the pathological end if somebody's displaying those types of traits. But Dr. Craig has researched, narcissism, and I'm sharing the wrong one. This is the one I wanted to share. 9 things everyone should understand about echoists and their complicated connection to narcissist. All right. And so this is his book, Rethinking Narcissism. And I ordered it on, so I haven't read it yet. I ordered the audiobook. I will be checking it out. I have heard a lot of great things about the book. And so echoism is a trait that my colleagues and I have begun measuring. And like all traits, it exists to a greater and lesser degree in everyone. People who score well above average in echoism qualify as echoists, and their defining characteristic is a fear of seeming narcissistic in any way. So, this is the person that is like self deprecating almost, like they are just like, don't want to be seen, like, just I don't want, but like it's the complete opposite spectrum of narcissism. Of all the people we measured, echoists were the most warm-hearted, but they're also afraid, of becoming a burden, often unsettled by attention, especially praise, and agreed with statements like, when people ask me my preferences, I'm at a loss. Where narcissists are addicted to feeling special, echoists are afraid of it. And this his the naming of this came out of Greek mythology, where narcissist and Echo, so Echo is a nymph who eventually falls madly in love with narcissist, and what Echo does is just echoes everything that narcissist says, which of course he loves. And Echo is like, don't look at me, and the narcissist isn't going to give them any attention. And so Echo is cursed by Zeus's wife. I forget the name, me and names. This one doesn't have it. But Echo is cursed to only be able to echo what other people say. That Echo loses her voice and her ability to speak for herself. And a lot of my clients can really identify with that type of especially coming from families where there is a lot of gaslighting, invalidation, and where they weren't able to have a voice. And they might have learned to just echo what the other people wanted, and that's how they received love. And yet, I do think that deep down, echoists do kind of want to be seen, but like as soon as they are seen, as soon as they are acknowledged, that's an uncomfortable place for them to be, and they'll back off of that. And so, um, this article goes into more of that. All right. So there was another, I did want to share Dr. Craig talking about this, and I am going to come to y'all's questions and comments down in the description and no, down down in the chat. And so uh, I'm going to play this and we will talk. So this is Dr. Craig's channel, and let's talk about this real quick.
A new one for a
The sound might be a little different. I'm going to try to boost it as best I can. So I won't pause this. Um, so that if you have to adjust the volume when I come back to talk, you might have to adjust the volume.
reminder for anybody who hasn't been watching my videos. Echoism, you want to think of as a fear of special attention. Somebody who has echoism, I should also back up and say echoism is a trait. It is not a disorder, at least not in the mild range, and not until things get really extreme might you see disorders. But think of it as a trait. There's a fear of special attention. These are people who live life by the rule, the less room I take up, the better. On self-report measure, on our self-report measure, there is only one self-report measure. They agree with statements like, when people ask me my preferences, I'm often at a loss. I'm not sure what I want or need for my relationships. I'm afraid of becoming a burden. So the fear, really, the central fear of echoism is fear of seeming narcissistic in any way. So how does this develop? Well, based on our research and looking at just different other trait measures, other measures of personality characteristics, like, is somebody extroverted? Are they introverted? Are they more emotionally sensitive? Are they less emotionally sensitive? There are ways that you can measure that, and we gathered all that information and related it to people who score high on echoism to see what the patterns were. And what came out of it was that somebody who struggles with echoism tends to be more emotionally sensitive. They might experience feelings more intensely, not always, but they trend in that direction. So you want to think of this somebody who comes into the world who has a natural biologically based temperament where they tend to experience feelings with a greater depth or greater intensity than maybe other people do. So think of this as a sensitive temperament, akin to highly sensitive persons. If you're not aware of what a highly sensitive person is, or that work by Elaine Aron, I feel free to Google it. You'll find some information, but it's similar to what I'm describing now. you take somebody with this kind of temperament and then you place them in an environment with, say, a narcissistic parent. This is what happened to me in many ways, where you have a parent who either is so loud and domineering and always needs to be the center of attention that they can't leave any room for you, this person with a more emotionally sensitive temperament, or alternatively, that would be describing an extroverted narcissist. If it's a more vulnerable narcissistic presentation or introverted narcissist, this is the parent who you feel like you've got to walk on eggshells, not because they're going to explode, but everything has to sort of cater to their own emotional sensitivity. They act like everything is too much for them. It's always like they feel put upon in some way. It's obviously a very different presentation, but either way, this takes somebody with an emotionally sensitive temperament and it leaves them feeling like they cannot have too much impact. It's going to cause problems. They will be attacked. They will be criticized. This is a recipe for echoism. Another recipe for echoism: take that same generally sensitive temperament, put in an environment with a parent who models echoism, where this is a parent who says, now you don't want to get too much of a big head. I had a client whose mother often cautioned her, now don't get too full of yourself over this. Every time she had a moment of pride or celebration, as you can hear over time, it doesn't leave much room for those feelings. And the end result is this is somebody who worries that somehow, if they actually let themselves have these feelings, that they're going to seem narcissistic in any way. And in both instances, what it teaches somebody who feels things that more of that depth and more intensely is that it's going to challenge or even disrupt the relationship if they behave in those ways at all. So they're going to be much more likely to watch their own feelings, watch their own reactions, and make sure that they never ask for too much. They don't turn to people with too much in the way of needs, and they even might bury their needs and feelings in order to protect that relationship. In that way, echoism really is the exact opposite of extreme narcissism, where
All right. And so, um, let me so there are a lot of great questions, and because somebody asked, "Is echoism different from being an introvert?" And so being introverted, it's not necessarily about not being seen. The way I see introversion is that it's where a person gets their energy. So I am an extrovert. So I get my energy from interacting and engaging with people. I don't feel drained after doing these lives. I I've switched to just doing lives because I despise like me just talking to the camera. Like, that's boring to me, that's not engaging, but there are some people that despise going live because the interaction and input from other people tends to be too much, and that is draining for them. And so the way that I look at introversion and extroversion is more about where people get their energy. So there are people that being around people is draining for them, and then they need to go, recharge. Now, so I have a conference coming up next week. So I will likely do some shorts. I don't know if I'm going to be able to go live next Saturday. But I might put out some shorts. I might do a Friday night live depending on what's happening. I will post whatever I end up planning on doing, or I might just take a break because at the conference I'm going to be talking, I'm going to be engaging with people, and by the end of the day, I might be really, really drained. Because for anyone, if they're around people all day, at some point that is going to get draining and like you have to sleep. Everybody has to recharge. But normally introverts, being by themselves, like they don't mind staying at home all day by themselves, not interacting with people. That is fine for them. And and it's more about just fitting in. It's about not being seen. So, like, not wanting to be a burden, not wanting to be too much, not wanting to just not wanting to do those things. And y'all know I have squirrel moments, and so thank you. I did find a way to get the psych nerd earrings. I haven't been able to find something that can mass produce them, so I just got these. I was only able to order one pair. If I ever find out a way to mass produce them, I definitely will. But I liked talking about this because this is different from codependence, because codependence is about helping the other person, whereas echoism, it's about not being seen and letting the other person, so that's the person where you ask, "So where do you wanna eat?" And they're like, "Where do you wanna eat?" Like, they will never make a decision. They'll never say what they want. They don't say how they feel. They more just echo the environment that they're in, but then they're kind of burying and denying their own thoughts, their own feelings. So that's where somebody comes into therapy and they're like, I don't know what to say or talk about, because therapy is the one space where it's like, this is all about you. And I can't. So I might ask some questions, but it can be an uncomfortable experience for some people because they're just like, what do I say? Like, I don't want to do this wrong. And there's no bad way to do therapy. And so that is that part. I want to say thank you to Aisha so let me know how to say it. If it's Aisha Lynn, I like to get names correct. Thank you for the super chat. I appreciate it. And um yes, there's really no self. And it's interesting because the narcissist also doesn't have a self, and they are puffed up and inflated. They have an inflated sense of self, but they actually don't have confidence. So an individual that is at that extreme end of narcissism, they don't feel good about themselves. That's why they have to always have the attention, because the minute they don't have attention, they're thinking, what's wrong with me? Did I do that wrong? Like they can't handle criticism because they're actually very insecure under all of that bravado or whatever. And so all right. And so yes, an echoist would just agree. And this is a way that some people survived their childhood, because they might have grown up in a family where it was not safe to set a boundary, to say how you really feel, to have an opinion, that wasn't something that they were allowed to do. And it reminds me kind of how someone that might be raised in a high control, high demand cult type family or group, where individual expression is discouraged and you're meant to just kind of think like the group. You're meant to just be like everyone else and do what everyone else is thinking, and not to question, not to think for yourself. And that's why a lot of cult leaders, they are often narcissists that will, and the way that you survive in that type of environment is by being small, not saying anything, not speaking up. Like that's how, and you don't set boundaries. You're not able to set boundaries in like a high demand, high control group. And so, um, I do want to talk about how people can set boundaries, and just give some practical tips for setting boundaries. So let me get that ready. All right. So let's share this. Let's see. All right. I'm going to make this bigger so that this can be seen a little better. Here we go. It's over here. All right, I'll try to make it even bigger. And I have this linked down in the description. This was a free link from Nedra Glover Tawwab. This was developed by her. She has a book, Set Boundaries, Find Peace. I have that in my Amazon storefront, where I have book recommendations and different things. If you're ever looking for self-help books, I also have a separate one that is for parenting tools and resources. Also, if people have questions about like what hair products I use and stuff, and I don't have any one thing that I'm like loyal to, so I switch around because some products work for me in the winter, and then I switch every like 3 to 6 months or so. And sometimes it's based on what's cheapest. And so, all right. So, with setting boundaries, identify areas where you are exhausted, resentful, or angry, and then check in with your core values. Because maybe I'm frustrated that a particular family member keeps asking me for money. And sometimes we think people should just know our boundaries, and boundaries have to be communicated. And so if that family member comes to me and asks for money again, I might say, "No, I don't have it." Or I might just say, and just saying no is often really hard because often people want to explain. You want to be careful not to over explain, because sometimes when somebody over explains, it's almost like it gives off the vibe to the other person that that the person isn't completely comfortable with the decision. And somebody that doesn't respect boundaries might push a little harder, knowing that in the past they've benefited from that person not having boundaries. So you quickly find out if you start setting boundaries, the healthy people in your life, the emotionally mature people in your life, it's normally like, "Oh, I didn't know that bothered you. Like, thanks for letting me know." Like, that's typically how setting a boundary goes. If I were to ask my mom for money and she said no, I wouldn't get mad at her because when you ask somebody something, you should be prepared for a no. But there are some people that are used to getting their way, to manipulating, and the biggest thing to stop manipulation is boundaries. Because often when people are being manipulated, you can often see that it's happening. But sometimes I don't want to upset the other person. I don't want to deal with them blocking me or with their reaction, if they're gonna have a tantrum, and so sometimes what I have to do is work myself up to be prepared for how they might react. And sometimes as you're starting to set this process, sometimes you start small, where if this is somebody that I always give money to, when they come and say, "Hey, can I borrow $20?" I might say, "Let me get back to you." 'Cause that gives me some more time, that lets me prepare. And then if they reach back out like, "Oh, yeah, I want to check in." It's like, "Oh, yeah, I don't have it." Or, like, sometimes building up, so sometimes providing some space. A friend of mine on TikTok, she is first generation in her family. She's not able to set boundaries in clear ways because there are cultural differences within her family. It would be viewed as disrespectful if she just told her parents no. And so, in respecting her culture, she might set what she calls sneaky boundaries. And a sneaky boundary is like, oh, so if I'm a college student going home for the holidays, I might say, "Oh, mom and dad, I know how important my grades are to you. So I'm only staying Thursday night, and then I'm heading right back to school on Friday." If I know that staying with my family for the entire break, if that would be too stressful, if I don't want to stay with them for that entire time, like sometimes there can be sneaky ways to set a boundary, because in that statement I'm pointing out what's important to them, which then helps them get on board with the boundary that I'm setting. Instead of saying like, "Oh, I only want to stay for Thursday night." The parent might get upset about that. But if you set it in that way, sometimes it can go over a little better. Define your boundary. What do you not want to hear, see, or do? Trust your intuition. Moments of, "I feel it in my gut, something doesn't feel quite right." Intuition tells you what you need to hear, and not what you want to hear. And often people, especially people with complex trauma, people that have been through a lot, they don't really trust themselves. And so part of this can sometimes be in talking with, if you do have a therapist, if you do have healthy, safe people in your life that you can run some of this by, not that they're telling you what to do or what not to do, but they're helping you identify, like, this is something I'm thinking about doing. Is this too much? Because sometimes we get in our own heads about, I can't tell them no. Like, this is what I'm supposed to do, and yet I don't wanna do it. Like, and that would be the gut feeling. This isn't something that I want to do. I don't want to go home for that entire week. And so being able to find ways to trust your intuition, say no without apologizing, which is hard. So I try to turn my "I'm sorries" into "thank you." So if I'm late to something, instead of saying, "I'm sorry for being late," I try to say, "Thank you for waiting for me." And if I it has happened where I've messed up my schedule, and it doesn't happen often, but maybe about once a year, I might accidentally miss an appointment. And somebody reaches out and they're like, I had you down, like, what happened?" I'm like, oh my gosh. And so I might say, "Thank you so much for reaching out. Something happened with my calendar. Here's my availability. Please know, charge my head, not my heart. Like, something happened with my calendar." And then I don't beat myself up about that for like weeks and weeks. So sometimes with echoist, and then also with people that struggle with codependency, sometimes what and also people pleasers, sometimes they have this shame and this inner dialogue that torments them on a regular basis of, you should be perfect. You should be exactly what people want. Like, you should be all of these shoulds. And they don't give themselves permission. They don't give themselves permission to be human. So, one of my big things that I've internalized is mistakes are how we learn. So I make mistakes. I mess up. That's why I like doing these lives, and sometimes I'll go back and watch my own live. And if I edited the videos, if I recorded this all by myself and went back and looked at it later, I would cut out some of the ums. I would make sure that things flowed smoothly. But with a live video, it is what it is. And okay. And there will always be people that, even on a video that seems more polished, more put together, there's somebody that might find an issue with that. Sometimes people project their own stuff onto you. And what I mean by that is, there are some people that I will never be good enough for. Like, there's nothing I could do, there's nothing I could say, because it's not about me, it's about them. And it's about how they perceive me, whatever story they tell themselves about me that's not based on our actual interactions. And so being able to be okay with other people not liking you, which is hard. Like, that is, like, I might set the boundary and they might get upset. Those are their emotions. They're not mine. So it's not my job to make sure that other people are comfortable, which is really hard for people. That's really, really hard for a people pleaser, for somebody that's used to resolving all the conflict, to making sure that everybody else is okay, putting everybody else's needs before their needs. And it's not about being selfish and putting myself first all the time. So, like, with my 6-year-old son, if I never played with him, if I never gave him any attention, that would be selfish. That would be neglectful. But saying, "Okay, there's 1 hour, one day a week where I am not available, and your father's home." And something that helps me keep my peace is, on the weekends, our child has quiet time. And normally for quiet time, that is my time to breathe. My partner and I, we share, but, like, a lot of parenting stuff, I do a lot of the parenting, and sometimes I need a break. And on a day of being mom all day, especially when he's home, I just need 2 hours, and I've done it ever since he was little. We have quiet time, and, he doesn't nap. My kiddo gave up naps during COVID, like, that was the worst. Like, that was the worst possible time for a kid to stop napping, like, right at the beginning, and I think he was 3, he was 2 years old? I think he was about 2. Um he just stopped napping, but it was like, I am and my kid goes go, go, like, he's go, go, go all day, every day, and sometimes mommy needs a break, and that's not selfish. That it's okay for me to take time for me to recharge my battery, for me to get some paperwork done, or to just do whatever it is that I need to do, and then I'm able to give him then I'm less irritated when I do spend time with him because I did take that time. So, be assertive, calm, and polite. Pay attention to people's reactions. If someone gets upset about you setting a boundary, it is more evidence that a boundary is needed. Define consequences. So there's a difference between a boundary and a request. So a request is don't yell at me. A boundary is if you keep yelling, I'm going to go. So if I'm talking on the phone to somebody and if they're yelling and screaming at me, it's like, "Hey, I really don't do yelling. If you keep yelling, I'm gonna have to go." And they're like, "Forget you." And they keep yelling. "All right, have a good day. Bye." And then I can turn my phone on silent if they, like, wanna bombard my phone, if they wanna call I don't that's between them, but, I am at peace with the so one of the things I personally don't deal with is people yelling and screaming at me. That's just it's not something that happens in my family. My family, we can get loud, but it's, like, in a gregarious or, like, in a we're all laughing and talking kind of way. We don't get loud when we're, like, angry at each other. Like, that's where people calm, they manage their emotions, and then we'll come back and deal with a conflict if there is one. Let go of guilt. Your no may empower the other person to take responsibility or make better choices instead of enabling them to keep doing what they're doing. Let go of guilt. And that's where if somebody keeps coming to me for money, maybe they might need to manage some of their resources better, or they might need to seek certain supports. Or so I'm big on resources and tools. And if somebody was coming to me needing that type of support on a consistent basis, I would support them and like, hey, here's I don't know if you've checked out this resource. It might be helpful, but I'm not going to become their source. Like, I'm not going to be the one that's now responsible for that other person. That's just not me. And then use support. If someone is being harmful or crossing boundaries, talk to a safe person. And her book was good. Some simple phrases to say no. And my favorite is no. No is a complete sentence. In our family call, so our family does a Zoom call every week, and whoever's available kind of hops on, and, my uncle was kinda joking with me, and he was like, "Can I borrow some money?" And I just said, "No." That was it. And everybody laughed. I was like and he was joking, he wasn't being serious about it. But no thanks. I think I'll pass. I'm not taking on new things at this time. It doesn't sound like the right fit. I'd rather not, thanks. That doesn't work for me. I appreciate your time, but no thank you. And I do realize sometimes some people need to put a bit of space before they say no. And so here are some of those books that I was talking about. And so Rethinking Narcissism is right at the top. This is in my self-help books. This is an affiliate link. If you buy your books from a local bookstore, please check your local bookstore, Barnes and Noble, wherever you buy your books. This was easy for me to create a list here. And the boundaries book, somebody recommended Where You End and I Begin as a helpful book. And then let's see, Set Boundaries, Find Peace. And so this is the book. You don't have to get like the workbook. I'll just be honest. You don't if if you really love the book and you wanted to dive deeper with the workbook, there is a workbook available. The book is phenomenal. So please, if you're going to check out something, check out the book. And then I have a lot of other tools and resources on there. And let me see if there was anything else. I think that was everything I wanted to share. Let me come back to the chat. All right. I have a no button. I love that. I'm gonna have to get because I think on Amazon, I think they sell like because okay, I spend too much money on Amazon. My bad. Like that's why I signed up as an Amazon affiliate to have like affiliate links and stuff, and they pay me in Amazon gift cards, and it just goes back to Amazon. All right. I love this. I love that quote. Don't set yourself on fire to make someone else warm. And some people are trained to like self-sacrifice or to do that. And I feel like especially mothers for some reason. So I see a lot of mom shaming. So this one person I follow over on TikTok, she talked about how she doesn't play with her kids. She does activities with them, but when it comes time to just playing, her kids play together. And she wasn't big on like getting down and just playing. Like that wasn't something that brought her joy, and people freaked out about it. She wasn't saying that she didn't spend time with her kid. Like she was just like I don't enjoy just playing. I don't enjoy that part. She enjoyed activities, all these other things. And people are always going to have an opinion, and you're not going to please everybody. You're just not going to. I love this. I heard the behavior panel say, uh, all we do in life is to fit in, to be accepted. Exactly. All right. I love that. I love that. Yes, Buttercup, going ahead and find you that no button. And sometimes some people they can't start with no. And so if somebody is just starting the journey of setting boundaries, I say start with strangers. Sometimes it's easier to set boundaries because sometimes we have like it wouldn't hurt as much if I disappoint a stranger versus if I disappoint like my partner or something. And we have a newer Chick-fil-A in our area, and, the first time I went, they forgot my kid's ice cream because I like to switch the toy for the ice cream, and, they forgot it, and I'm not gonna call, I'm not gonna go back. It is what it is, like, I didn't realize it until I was already at home, and I was like, "Ugh, they forgot the ice cream." Well, the next time I went back, once again, and it's brand new, staff is brand new. They forgot the ice cream, and so, I just was like, "Excuse me." I was like, "Is the ice cream in here?" Sometimes you just ask a question. Is the ice cream in here?" And the guy was like, "Oh," and then he went, he looked. I did order an ice cream. He got the ice cream and it was fine. Like it wasn't a big deal. But in the past, I would have been anxious about slowing down the line for the other people. And feeling like they're like, "She already got her food. Why is she still sitting there?" So I was big on like not being difficult or not if I ordered something at a restaurant and let's say I don't like mushrooms, I wasn't one to say I don't want it with mushrooms. The funny thing about me is sometimes with food, I normally don't make a whole bunch of edits to whatever comes with it because sometimes I'm surprised and I like it the way it is. And so like I normally don't like now if it has arugula, I don't like arugula. I know that I don't like that. And if it's a salad that comes with arugula, and if I can get it with a different type of lettuce, I am gonna ask for that. But there was a time that I would not do that because I did not want to seem like difficult or extra or blah blah blah. And so I am who I am, and if somebody doesn't like it, that's not on me, because I think some people internalize when people don't like them or they don't like what what they're choosing or saying. I feel like some people take it personally. Ah, the thank you for waiting for me. Yes. yes. So turning I'm sorries into thank you. So I've worked with some people that excessively say I'm sorry. Like, I'm sorry. I'm sorry this is taking so much time. I'm sorry for this. I'm sorry. I'm sorry for that. And I'm like, and so that's where I'm like, you get to exist. You get to take up space. That's not a bad thing. And some people, because of just how things were, the way that they might have survived childhood is by being small and not being seen, not being too much. And maybe there was a sibling that had a lot of emotional concerns or something, and that was the person that got all of the attention. And it kept stress off the family, them not knowing what was really going on with their other child, or people just feeling like they can't speak up. And that's where I say start small, start in safe spaces, and, I think that can be really helpful. Witness, you are hilarious. You are not a burden. And when that thought comes, because that thought is going to automatically come to some people's mind, but that is the voice of, if they do have a history of somebody that wasn't safe, that wasn't emotionally safe, that just if they did get that type of feeling growing up, knowing that every child, I think, should feel loved, accepted, seen, and heard. That is something that I think every child should feel. And sadly, that's not something that happens. Even in homes that aren't technically like, it's not like they would have never been removed by CPS or anything like that. It's just the home was just kind of people were rejecting, invalidating, but it didn't reach a threshold where like services would get involved or anything like that. It definitely can make an impact, and I do hope that that this is helpful. The last thing I will share, and I do believe it should be down in the description, is just how empathetic people can set effective, loving boundaries. Just a few more tips, and then we will wrap it up for today. Let me make myself okay. Let's add to stage. Yay. All right. All right, that was just me figuring it out. So there might be some ads on here, like as I'm scrolling. I am not a fan of BetterHelp. It's not my own personal thing. If people are looking for reduced therapy costs or reduced therapy services, I recommend Open Path Collective. Or some other. Sometimes on psychologytoday.com, you can sort by therapists that do sliding scale, or sometimes you can even search by like a certain price range as well. But all right, so let's scroll down to their tips for setting boundaries. Identify your own needs, that can be a good first step. Empathic people often prioritize the needs of others, and so making sure to take time and make space for your own needs. What do how much space and solitude do you need to feel at your best? What genuinely refreshes and recharges you? So I will never forget, I went to an event with some friends, and I knew that there were gonna be a whole bunch of people, and we were gonna be doing a lot all together, and I just needed my own room to, like, refresh and recharge. And it might have disappointed the person I was visiting. Like, they probably would have wanted me to stay with everyone else, but I knew for me, I needed my own room, I needed my own space. That is what helps me. When I'm traveling, there's some people I travel with, if I were to travel with them, I would get my own room. Like, I know who I can share a room with and who I can't share a room with. And not that there's anything wrong with that person. There's nothing wrong with me knowing, like, hey, if we travel together, you like to stay up all night. Like, I gotta sleep. like like there's some people, or you bring people to the room and you don't respect my boundaries. No, like those aren't people that I would share a small space with. That's just not what I would do. Um, all right. So pause before saying yes. That's such a good one. So when somebody asks you something, you might want to immediately just reflexively say yes. Like, "Hey, can you help out with this?" Your first thing might be to say yes. My I would encourage you to breathe. Just breathe. And then sometimes you might say, "Let me get back to you on that. Let me check my calendar. Let me see if that works for me." Because sometimes you might be building up the courage to say no if this is something that is hard. So try to pause before committing. Shift your perspective. When you want or need to say no, think about how you'd like someone to decline your request. Because often people that have trouble saying no, they often respect the no's of others. So like often people that struggle with setting boundaries for themselves, like they often if other people say no, they don't get mad, they don't, have a big reaction. Sometimes they don't ask for anything at all. Like that's the other thing. But um thinking about how you would want somebody to say no, or if it was someone else, because often we the advice we give and what we do for ourselves doesn't always match. So I've worked with some people where they have trouble saying no, but they would encourage a friend to say no. And so that's where I sometimes say, treat yourself like a friend. Like, what would you, if you had a friend in the same situation, what would you tell them? Because sometimes they hold themselves to an unrealistic standard that they don't hold other people to. And so, um, all right. And so those are the things that I wanted to share for today. Yes, protect your sleep and your peace. Exactly. Exactly. Yes. I'm so glad this was helpful. I do remember I got a question about somebody with a boss. I just remembered. Somebody asked a question about their boss creates drama and they wanted some tips for how to handle that. I can't give individual advice. I can just share general tips and tools. And everybody's situation is going to be different. Every workplace is different. There are some workplaces that are toxic. And some signs of a toxic workspace is where there are no boundaries. Your boss texts you and calls you at and you're not on call. It's like so there was a time I had a job where I was on call and sometimes I would get calls in the middle of the night because there was a client emergency and we had to address something. But my boss wasn't texting me at 12 a.m. just to tell me about a meeting or something. Like there's some bosses that don't have good boundaries. There are some bosses that engage in gossip that kind of that don't create a safe work environment. There are some people that are invalidating. And so that's where for depending on what's happening in a situation, that's where someone they might have to talk with somebody one on one that they trust to get some individual tips or recommendations. But if my boss is spreading like a bunch of rumors or starting a bunch of drama, like, oh, did you know so and so is doing this? And so I wouldn't share what's happening in my life with that individual because they're probably going to tell other people. So anyone that's like gossiping and spreading rumors and doing all that and creating drama, they would probably put me in the middle of that as well. There are some people where their brains thrive in the midst of chaos and uncertainty, and they start chaos and uncertainty. And uh, so, everybody's situation's different. If there was a way for me to search and look for because if it is like a work environment situation where the entire staff, like everybody is just drama fueled and all of that, I might need to dust off my resume and look at other options. But don't leave. Like if you like need that job, stay, and because once again, these are just general tips. So something that I might consider is looking at other positions. I might consider if you need to use EAP. So if you're in the United States, some businesses offer free or reduced counseling. Sometimes you can talk one-on-one with a therapist to talk about like how this is going and get some individualized tips and suggestions. You often have to go to HR. And if I was going to HR, I might say, because if this is creating anxiety or this is creating stress at work, I wouldn't go to HR and say I'm having issues with my boss. Like I'm just being honest. I would probably go and say something like, I'm having some stress. Do we have EAP sessions where I could talk with somebody to get some help, some support around some work related stress? And document. So if you are in a kind of negative situation at work, making sure to keep emails, like if things are in writing, because sometimes what I've seen is like there's all this verbal stuff, but nothing's in writing. But if people are being like, if there is some documentation, then like sometimes you can take a look at what your options are. And so I hope that's helpful. And then Sarah mentioned having a boss who had absolutely no boundaries, including trying to insert themselves into romantic relationship. And that's just like, don't we all have something else better to do? Like, why would why would people try to do that? Telling you that you should be available on weekends and at 4 a.m. That is weird. That is, in my, I don't, that is odd. That is very, very odd. And the reason why I mentioned documentation is because sometimes some people have been fired for unjust reasons or like so that's where documentation can sometimes be helpful. So sometimes people have toxic traits and they're in leadership. And so when I am interviewing at a new position, I like to ask them questions about so what style of leadership do the supervisors use? I don't do well with so I wouldn't say this in the interview. I don't like to be micromanaged. Like I just don't. Somebody that has to like be over me all the time and like watch me work cuz I'm like you can just do it. Like why do I like why do you have to watch me do it? Like that's just weird to me. Now I have had staff. So I used to train and support staff and I did have people that I had to kind of it wasn't and I would even say that I micromanage those people. It was they needed more support, and I would always ask them, "Hey, are there any things that could help support you meeting these deadlines? Are there any ways that we could support?" I always tried to take, a bit of a supportive stance, but if I have to be there as you're doing your job, like I feel like one of us is extra, and so I like educating this way. So not having a staff, I missed giving trainings. I used to do trainings like this with my staff all the time. And so that's what YouTube has kind of let me be able to do, continue to train, continue to teach, but like not have to be responsible for, you know, 15 to 25 adults. I like not having to be responsible for that. That's nice. And so I am super glad that we were able to chat and talk today. Next week, I am looking at covering there is a cult. Oh my gosh. Multiple people asked me to cover, I think it was down in Georgia. Was it Georgia? Y'all know me in names. Um, yeah, Nature Boy. So, Eligio Bishop, I might be saying it wrong. But Nature Boy, I do plan on covering that on Tuesday. Okay. Excuse me. But I hope you all enjoy the rest of your day. Bye bye.